Hello, everyone. Good afternoon. Good afternoon. Welcome very much to this webinar. My name is Jenna Chiang. I work here at Takataka Nimali, and I'll be your moderator for the day. We're just about to start, and I can see a good number of us are already on the call. So we'll give it another 3 minutes there. Around 3:07, 3:08, we should ideally be starting. So feel free to familiarize yourself on the chat box. You can introduce yourself. We are hoping to have a very interactive session as we've been doing with all our webinars. So welcome everyone. We are about to start somewhere at around 3:07. So we'll just give it a few more minutes and then we'll be able to start. Hey, it's around 3:08, so we're just about to start. Welcome again. My name is Jane. I will be your moderator for today. In today's webinar session, we'll be discussing redefining the grain value chain in East Africa. And when we say defining, ideally the focus of the session will be what circular approaches exist when it comes to waste management and logistical trends. So some of the few things that we expect to cover during this session is, of course, on circularity and waste management approaches that can be used in the sector. We hope to uncover conversations around the logistics and trade in the context of the Grain Council. Additionally, we also want to explore what investment opportunities exist in the sector from a financial point of view with a lens of sustainability and circularity. So we're definitely in for a very exciting conversation. I had requested one of my colleagues from East Africa Grain Council to introduce themselves, but I can see Gerald, your video is on. So I don't know if Olive or Gerald is saying hi to us, but since Gerald is nodding, Gerald, you can greet us before we start the session.
Good afternoon, colleagues. My name is Gerald Masila, Executive Director, Eastern Africa Grain Council. And today we are very excited this afternoon to host this webinar in partnership with Takataka Nimali to discuss very important aspects that affect our business in the grain value chain, looking at the circular approaches to waste management and logistics trends. So very exciting. And on behalf of VAGC, I welcome you all and request other colleagues of VAGC in the call to also maybe do a quick salutation. Back to you, Jane.
Okay, thank you so much. I don't know if Olive or Jillian wants to say hi. Okay. If either of them is ready, then let us know. But in the meantime, I'd like us to start with the first presentation of the day. I want to invite my colleague, Evan Sabok, who will be walking us through what circularity approaches exist in this sector and also the conversations around what innovations and technology exist with a lens for the grain value chain. So Evan Sabok, please introduce yourself and feel free to take us through the session and through your presentation.
Thank you, Jane. My name is Ivan Sabok. I'm the head of Waste Management and Circular Economy Advisory here at Takataka Nimali. And I would like to welcome you all to this webinar and to this presentation. We'll be looking briefly at circular solutions to waste management and reducing grain waste along the entire grain value chain. And we are hoping to look at some of the grain waste challenges that are predominant in the market today. We are also going to look at the range of losses that currently exist within the value chain, from harvesting all the way to introduction into the market for final consumption. We'll proceed to look at circular opportunities for grain waste management and waste reduction. And then we'll wrap up by looking at some of the innovations that have so far worked and sum that up with some of the case studies of enterprises that have successfully implemented circular solutions to grain waste management. So you'll allow me to share my screen. So that we can briefly have these discussions. Kindly confirm from your end if you are able to see my screen. Just a thumbs up will be adequate. So when we talk about turning grain waste into economic value, I mean, it may sound as an ambiguous statement, but we are going to break this down by looking at the entire grain value chain, and then identify some of the major losses or points of losses that the value chain currently experiences, and how we can come up with corrective interventions to either reduce these losses or to exploit areas that are conventionally considered to be less valuable within the value chain. So currently, global food insecurity is rising, and projections indicate that 343 million people across the globe are facing hunger. And this is according to the World Bank. Now, this necessitates increased production in the agricultural sector just to meet the growing demands of food and feedstock, of course, because that's also captured along the grain value chain. Now, addressing waste in this context is essential just to make sure that the market gets the right quality, as well as we enhance the value for the the agricultural community, the grain community, and the entire value chain. And this also leads to, also ties into the conversation around reduction of environmental impact of, waste management within the agricultural sector or within generally the waste sector, which currently, looking at the methane gas alone is cited as contributing up to a third of the total global methane emissions. Now, what are some of the points of losses along the waste value chain? This exists across the entire system, from harvesting all the way to logistics or introduction in the market or distribution, processing, and finally consumption and the byproducts. So allow me to, just I think stop sharing and reshare. I think I'm having a bit of issues on my end. I think we are somewhere. Yeah. So this is the document. I think I've missed something here.
Evans, as you're working on sharing, I know you're falling on the tangent on the points of loss for waste management. If you could speak into that in the meantime, that would be very insightful. I know when we're talking about waste management, often we only think of post-harvest loss, and sometimes you don't imagine that at the point of harvest, we actually have some waste in that value chain that is of significant value. You could perhaps share your thoughts on that.
Sure, yes. So kindly a thumbs up if you are able to see my screen. Let's look at some of the points of losses within the grain value chain. So there are various types of losses, or there are various aspects that could cause losses, from moldy grains to substandard grains that ultimately get rejected by market. And this can occur at any point within the value chain. So it could be due to delayed logistics for distribution. It could be due to poor storage conditions, high humidity or moisture. It could be due to infestation by pests or other forms of like pests and rodents, or other forms of microorganisms or microbes that ultimately adversely affect the quality of the grain. So, but this doesn't have to be always the case, because we can have corrective interventions that ensure that we not only enhance the quality of what we have as grain or what we are introducing to the market, but also reduce, the quantity that end up getting spoiled or damaged or lost. And for us to achieve this effectively, we can undertake a comprehensive audit just to identify these points of losses and come up with proactive measures to avoid potential losses. Now, if you take a look, we have up to like 6 different points. We have a loss that can take place at the harvesting stage. We have a drying, probably you have insufficient drying equipment, and then we have a threshing, you have grain breakages, And then we have at storage, as I've mentioned, you could have poor environmental parameters, high humidity, or poor temperature conditions. We could also have transport issues. So in terms of logistics, just delayed logistics, or you're transporting your grain in poorly, poorly ventilated or poorly regulated containers. And then finally, we have marketing and policy aspects that could also, be a major, contributor to losses. And this could range from anywhere from poor coordination of the marketing policy to low prices, which discourage, offtake or discourage introduction of these products into the market at the right time. Then we have a number of interventions that we could pursue. So from timely harvesting at the harvesting stage and managing of the pests, all the way to using modern technologies like hermetic containers, just to discourage infestation by pests and molds. Now, amid all these losses, actual or potential, we are privileged to have some tested and verified approaches or circular approaches to ensuring that this is minimized. And these include conversion of spoiled grain into animal feed, conversion of farm residues such as bran and husks into biomass energy or alternative source of energy, which is also environmentally sound. We could also do compost. And then we have, broken or damaged grain that could be incorporated as processing ingredients to, just to upcycle the grains that would ideally be considered less useful at this stage. So we could adopt basically, the circular economy principles of reusing or recycling or repurposing. You could do upcycling based on what the final product will look like. And with these approaches, we'll be able to significantly reduce the losses that usually result along the entire value chain. Now, for us to effectively be able to undertake these conversions, we need certain technologies, or for us to even reduce the amount of losses or further enhance grain byproducts, we have certain innovations that have been used. Some are currently still very novel and are still being tested, and some of them are more established and have been widely embraced. So some of these include, use of in-store sensors just as at the storage stage. And what this ensures is that it helps to monitor environmental parameters, just helping us to proactively, come up with corrective measures whenever things appear to be going off board. And then we have technologies such as thematic storage. So basically keeping your grains or storing your grains in airtight containers to discourage infestation by pests and pests and molds, or even humidity, which are key culprits when it comes to grain damage and spoilage. So we can also use technologies that are predominantly being used, like threshers, just to reduce the volume and ensure that we effectively use the storage space. We also have for agricultural residue, because remember, we are not just reducing the spoilage and the grain losses, but we are also trying to exploit additional opportunities to generate additional income. And we can have other simple technologies like balers to reduce the quantity of farm residues such as straws and husks, just to make sure that they can easily be transported for further processing or value addition. And then we have technologies such as biomass pelletizers or briquette machines that basically are used to convert farm biomass into alternative sources of fuel, such as biomass briquettes, which also is a very good, is a very environmentally sound alternative. Now, let's look at, with this said, are these things really working? Let's look at some of the enterprises that have, adopted circular approaches to handling grain waste from production or from harvesting all the way to consumption and the byproducts. And we have two key enterprises. One is known as Regen Organics, and the other one is Bright Green Kenya. So far, from these two enterprises, we have uncovered certain things that have worked, and these are broken down into four different categories. We have upcycling of farm residues into alternative fuels, such as biomass briquettes, repurposing of spoiled grain into animal feed. We have production of compost from farm residues, and ultimately we look at what benefits these have generated. So apart from additional revenue creation, apart from creation of green jobs, we've seen some positive outcomes like generation of carbon credits, which today is a very huge conversation in the country. Following the introduction of carbon credit legislations and associated regulations just some years back. So Regen Organics, for example, has currently supported up to 8,000 farmers to adopt regenerative agriculture. And through this, we have had, the company has managed to generate up to 30,000 tons of, up to 50,000 tons of carbon offsets or carbon credits, if you like. And this has come as a result of successfully managing 30,000 tons of organic waste, or diverting that from the environment. Bright Green Kenya, on the other side, has adopted a business model that involves upcycling of farm waste that would otherwise be disposed of in the environment, or that would be taken to the landfill. And basically what they have done is to produce alternative sources of cooking fuel to support some of the most vulnerable households. So if you look at the kind of business model they have adopted, produce alternative fuel and then support some of the most vulnerable households. And as a result of this business model, they have managed to generate a substantial amount of carbon credit, which ultimately has led to a reduction in carbon footprint among the farmers that they've been working with. With that, we come to the end of our presentation. I think I can, Jen, if we have time for that, I can open up, I can open space for questions if we may have one or two, and then we'll be happy to, wrap up the presentation. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Evans. That was well packed in some 20 minutes of our first session. I just have a few follow-up questions, because I know we're talking about circularity, and especially in the green sector. We have three key principles we've cycle or repurpose. And I'm asking myself, in the context of like the grain value chain, are there other principles that we can explore beyond those three that ideally farmers in this sector can also be thinking around from an innovation point of view? I know the critical question sometimes is usually what's the business case of some of these principles, but sometimes it's not just about the business case. It's also the impact, right? Does it make operational efficiency? Does it minimize environmental impacts? I don't know if you have something to share beyond the three principles that you've discussed, as I also open our audience to feel free to either raise your hand or throw a question in the chat box to Evans before we proceed to our next panelist.
Sure, Jen. So majority of circular economy solutions are founded on the three principles, because these were the traditional principles. So you can either reduce. If you can't reduce, you can reuse. If you can't reuse, you can recycle. But more and more as things evolve and we continue to get new information, this has so far, or has since expanded to include, more novel concepts like upcycling, which involves basically taking a material that is almost valueless and then using it to create a product that is very, very valuable. Now, when we look at these concepts, beyond what I've shared, there are technologies that continue to emerge. And while some are still being tested, others have demonstrated, very good potential. So we have technologies like the black soldier fly, looking at the product. Looking at the post-harvesting, just the harvesting stage of the grain value chain. Usually, we expect a lot of farm, farm debris or farm residue, let me call it that way. And rather than banning this, as has been the traditional practice, this can be, supplemented with the normal organic waste, food scrap to, to deploy the black soldier fly technology. And what black soldier fly technology, for example, does is that it accelerates the process of decomposition or of composting. While this may give like almost an immediate return because you compost, you get organic fertilizer, which you can introduce into the market as another product to serve as an additional revenue stream. You have the potential to generate carbon credits, but carbon credits in the long term. But remember the but you usually need to demonstrate, in terms of traceability and data. In research, which also, because what we discuss is usually informed by research. So in research, we usually say that we only speak what data says. And that's the same thing with carbon credits. It has become a bad phrase these days, but most people realize that they cannot unlock it because usually people lack even the simple tools to demonstrate impact, demonstrate or consolidate data that will then lead to the carbon credit conversation we are talking about. So apart from looking at, these three basic principles, we can look at, from a long-term perspective, how we are likely to benefit from adopting circular economy practices within the grain value chain. And that requires a significant, amount of effort in terms of determining the kind of data that you have and how to package that data so that it makes sense to the carbon credit ecosystem. And currently, I know most of the time we've had to rely on foreign tools, but today we have a number of organizations that are, developing these tools locally just to meet the local demands and to ensure that they are developed to reflect the context of what we have domestically.
Thank you so much.
I see huge value in the carbon credit and just organizing the system to be able to convert as much as possible of farm waste into new value. Thank you, Jen.
Thank you very much. When you bring the conversation of carbon credits, it's a touchy one, here nor there. I'm seeing we don't have any questions yet in the chat box, so allow me to transition to the next panel. Thank you very much, Evans, for your presentation. We will definitely share the slides that you have presented today. So allow me to move to our second panelist, that's the Executive Director and CEO of Eastern Africa Grain Council, Mr. Gerald Masila. Gerald was here on time, very excited. Gerald currently is an agricultural economist, and beyond that, he has over 20 years of experience when it comes to management and working with private sector companies, and has held various capacities across those 2 decades. I know I am not doing a very good job of introducing you, Gerald. So I will let you take over to introduce yourself, introduce East Africa Grain Council to our members. I know some of your and I know we to know what does EAGC do. So I'll hand it over to you, Gerald. Welcome very much to the webinar.
Thank you very much, Jane. I hope I'm audible. And welcome again, everyone, to this very special webinar that we are hosting in partnership with Takataka Nimali and EAGC. As you may know, we are a member-based organization in the grain value chain, whose members are the actors from the whole value chain. Our members include the grain farmers, the grain traders, the grain processors, and the associate service providers who provide us quite a lot of solutions and technologies that we require in our sector. We were founded in 2006, and we have a vision to be the leading voice of the grain industry in Africa. We have a mission to advocate for an enabling environment and promote structured grain trade. And indeed, we also work for grain trade. So our measure of performance is grain trade. And we are looking at grain trade in terms of volume, in terms of value, in terms of variety, and even the velocity of trade within the country and across the country. And we have a number of interventions that we implement at TAGC, all geared at promoting and enabling grain trade. We do provide a market information service through the Regional Agriculture Trade Intelligence Network, where we collect market data and we give it to our members. We do training and capacity building through our institute, the Grain Business Institute. We do trade facilitation, linking our farmer producers to the traders and the processors through our GSOCO grain trading platform. And this is after we have organized the farmers into what we call the grain trade business hubs. These business hubs are the farmer groups coming together and forming a commercial entity where they're doing business. It's not just basic subsistence agriculture, but really doing business by undertaking collective action, getting together to agree on what to produce, source inputs together, aggregate their output, and be able to even access services and solutions from the membership. We also do have an investment in the Interfield Food Testing Laboratories, which is a lab that offers food testing and quality assurance, which I know a lot of us in this call do utilize. So in the context of today, we are looking at that whole value chain, and we are asking ourselves, how can we bring in circular approaches to waste management and also plug in logistical trends that address and speak to that. So that's just a very quick intro on EAGC. In the interest of time, we'll continue as you're engaging. Back to you, Jane.
Thank you very much, Gerald. I think that introduction is very timely because it lays a lot of context for why this webinar has been organized by EAGC. When you talk about grain trade and the elements of volume, velocity, and also just the variety of grains across that whole value chain, these are very many elements of food security that we're discussing here. So in particular to today's conversation, we're thinking on the logistical part of it, right? When you're thinking of circularity, when we're moving that grain from one location to another location, there's a whole logistical arrangement that has to be factored in so that we ensure the quality of that grain gets to the end user in a manner that is suitable. So maybe just to kick us off for this panel session, given this your experience when it comes to structuring commodity trading and like grain logistics, from a packaging point of view, what has been your experience when it comes to reusable or even biodegradable packaging? How can we integrate it into what we have in warehouses or even just the inventory system? And particularly, just to add on that, how can we ensure that integration happens without disrupting the efficiency of that trade? Because I know the biggest challenge we have when we introduce circularity conversations is farmers are like, we're not able to transition quickly and our grain will go bad. So perhaps you can give us what your experience has been from this point of logistics.
Yeah, thank you very much for that question. A very interesting one, because many times when we are discussing grain logistics and looking at the whole value chain, from moving the grain to farm level, through to a warehouse, carrying it through a vessel across the borders to a destination factory or warehouse, a lot of times we don't pause to think the packaging and the integrity of that packaging and its suitability and considerations about circularity, biodegradability, and all these sort of things. So what actually happens in the packaging of grains is that we have grains that, first of all, are coming in from the farms to the factories. And so that movement happens in packages that are bags. And generally, you have 2 or 3 main types. You have the gunny bags from the sisal, which we've used for many years, and they are very preferred because they are not only biodegradable, but also allow ventilation and good keeping of the grain. But then you also have the polypropylene bags that are very, very popular and used a lot. And then very recently, we've been able, like was mentioned by the previous presenter, we have been able to come up with hermetic storage solutions that use the principle of asphyxiation, so that when you put grain in that bag that does not allow air to go in and you tie it properly, then that means you're able to preserve that grain for trade and you minimize the losses. And all those are some of the developments that have happened in the grain sector in looking at packaging. And we are quite proud as EAGC because we were the first jurisdiction in the world to develop a standard for the hermetic storage bags. So we now are supporting other regions. The US are doing the standards, Germany and others, and they're learning from us. They always check out to us. They worked on building on our standard. So but when we are also looking at grain packaging, we have to be clear on what type of grain you're looking at, because we have different types. You've got cereals, which is maize, rice, wheat, and the grass family. But you also have pulses, the beans, the lentils, the legumes, and you have the oil seeds like the sunflower, soybean, sesame, and all those others that require a kind of packaging that addresses the form of the grain. Because when it is as a grain, it is granular. And when you process it, it goes into a powder form. And so that change in characteristic requires that the packaging considers that. And other considerations are the storage duration, how long do you intend to store it? And because that also affects the shelf life of that particular commodity. Other considerations are locations and the agroecology, including temperatures, ambient and relative humidities and all that. Other considerations are pest control. How does that packaging support you being able to achieve the pest control objective, which was mentioned earlier on as one of the causes of losses in grain. Ventilation, because grain is living, it has life. That's when we eat it, it actually adds to life. So that whole process is important. Then how you will transport that grain, the whole logistics of it, loading, offloading, piling it up, again addresses to your requirements on when you do the packaging to address that. And then finally, the commodity itself, is it a consumer ready to drink, or is it a bulk commodity that would have to deal with us? So when you look at the storage, location, and packaging needs, when you are addressing a product to a household, then the size of packs comes in. If it is a warehouse, then you are looking at bulk. And if you are going into the retail level, you are looking at branding. And if you are going to a factory, you're looking at, bigger bags that allow bulk handling. And so all these are considerations, and we are quite glad that our members have done a lot in investing in technologies, in improving all this packaging, and even being able to package recent innovations like the fortified whole grain. When you mill the entire whole grain, the characteristics in it are that you have to have a packaging that takes care of the fact that that commodity is really rich and fully with nutrition, with your proteins, your fats. And if you don't do the packaging properly, you end up with rancidity issues. And then again, we've seen very recently, again, our members coming with pre-cooked and ready, dehydrated, ready-to-eat foods that would require to be packaged in specific places. So very quickly, I would say those are some of the development, the considerations around packaging in grains and the grain industry, and lending themselves into the logistics of it, so that when you are moving it from point A to point B, you're ensuring the integrity of the grain in that package is maintained for the food safety that we need to address, and that there is no contamination.
Thank you very much. That was very loaded, Gerald. I'm always learning things when to your friends. First of all, congratulations on being a standard setter. We love to see that innovation in the continent. Often we're usually the ones that are adopting what is out there. So it'd be interesting to see from a standard point of view what that looks like. Definitely things that we can share with our audience post the webinar. But just allow me to follow up on this conversation. I know we've talked about the entire logistical arrangement. There's processing to some degree, there's transport to some degree, there's packaging to some degree. All this must cost money. For sure, doing a transition to something that's sustainable, there's a cost element to it. Sometimes we ask ourselves, who bears the cost? Is it the farmer? Is it the transporter? Where exactly does that cost fall to? So the question I want to follow up is, what financial instruments are currently existing that farmers can plug into that want to tap into circular models, whether they're thinking of circular models around transport or packaging? I don't know what exists in the market, but I know by the end of this webinar, we will know what exists in the market in terms of innovations to support a transition to circularity. Gerald, please enlighten us there.
Yeah, thank you. Addressing innovation and with regard to circularity on one hand, but beyond that, looking at also SDGs and looking at cost savings and coming up with innovations that are also environmentally friendly and that don't affect the safety and the quality of the grain. So we really have been engaging governments on the side of trying to come up with incentives that can encourage and support our members to invest in these innovations and to adopt the innovations. Because going into these innovations in packaging, number one, you require quite a lot of research. And in doing the research is a major investment, takes time. Secondly, a lot of the instruments, technologies you got to use are imported. And again, when you are engaging in that, there are taxes and other import duties that you have to deal with. Sometimes you also have to get experts from out there to come and help us, and getting those expatriate support comes at a cost. So for that innovation to be accelerated, we are engaging government a lot so that we have a lot more incentives that drive that. And part of the incentives also is to see to it that maybe there is very deliberate support from governments, even from a regulatory perspective, to entice and get the trade and the value chain to adopt and to invest in innovations. Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you for that response. Just moving on onto this conversation, because I know some of our audience members are across the East African region. I've seen a member from Tanzania that's in the chat box. Also, feel free to introduce yourself in the chat box and in the Q&A sessions. If you have instant questions for Gerald, feel free to also mention them. We will respond to them shortly. But I'm thinking around cross-border trade when it comes to the grain business in particular. What efforts can we put together when it comes to harmonizing, whether it's policy or regulation, around circularity when it comes from the point of packaging and logistics? Because I know for sure what regulations exist in Tanzania, in Uganda, in Kenya for how we can move the grain, in what quantities, in what state, and its transportation. What efforts have gone through harmonizing all these circular efforts across cross-border trade?
Yeah, thank you for that question, and a very important one, because the subject of harmonization is central to us, particularly because we are a regional organization. We are in 10 countries in the Eastern Africa region, EAC being the main seat. And indeed, we've done a lot and achieved a lot in harmonization. In fact, I would like to say from when EAGC was established, among the key results or key benefits we were able to deliver to trade was harmonization, because we started immediately from those days in a process where we engaged all the Bureau of Standards in the EAC, and following the EAC Standards Quality Management SQMT Act and the processes, we were able, after very many months of negotiations, of meetings with stakeholders, with Bureau of Standards, we were able to come up with a harmonized standard for maize, for wheat, and rice, beans, and their products. Actually, in 2015, we got over 30 standards harmonized in the EAC, and they were then again domesticated at the country, in each of the partner states. And that was a very, very big achievement, because before we harmonized the standards, standards were actually a barrier to trade. You would have a situation where a miller, say in Kenya, orders grade 1 from a supplier in Tanzania, and at the time, grade 1 specifications and grade 1 specifications in the Kenya and Tanzania were different. So the grade 1 delivered then gets rejected, and you have trade disputes and lots of those kind of problems. But right now, and for the last almost 10 years, we are working with one standard in the entire EAC, and that standard also includes packaging, where we've been able to even address pack sizes. And for example, and many people don't know, the standard prescribes that the size of a bag that you're going to put agriculture produce or maize or that should not be more than 50 kilograms. So 50 kilograms is the standard, and that has been supported even by other international conventions like the ILO, who are quite clear that we shouldn't subject a human being to carry a bag of 100, 120 kilos when their weight is maybe 60, 70 or something like that. So the packaging in terms of the size, but also the specifications of how you develop this packaging and the material you use, and to ensure that that contamination as a central point is addressed. And environment and environmental considerations have also been taken care of and addressed. And beyond just the package, we've had other innovations like coming up with aggregation and aggregation centers, which the GHubs are, where we're able to aggregate. And when we aggregate, we get economical quantities that you can move with a truck, and therefore your unit costs go much lower. And at that aggregation center, you have a point where you can do quality checks and safety. And so we've been able to get all those harmonized, including even certain very key parameters like moisture content, which we work with 13.5%, and other things like aflatoxin and mycotoxin. So with aflatoxin, the harmonized standard in the EAC for grain is 10 parts per billion for general grains. But if you're taking grains for baby foods, the standard is 5 parts per billion. And so all these are harmonization efforts we've been able to do that are bearing a lot of fruit. Thank you.
You were almost preempting to my next question in terms of what piloting has been done. I know we've talked about harmonization when it comes to packaging. We've also talked about the quantities in which the packaging should hold. You've mentioned on aggregation centers. I just want to touch on the transportation bit. I know in the circularity world, sometimes we're called enthusiasts, right? There are people who still don't believe in e-mobility and don't think it's a feasible mode of transport. I don't know, from a transport point of view, if you could share either a pilot or even a success story that can demonstrate circularity of moving grain, at least within the regional block. Let me take it up to you.
Yeah, you're right that transport and you'll be surprised to hear this. Transport and logistics in an invoice sometimes can take up more than maybe 30 or 35% of the total cost of a consignment. So transport is major. In some instances, like our sister sectors in horticulture and fresh produce, the situation is even a lot more difficult. But looking at measures and interventions to create more efficiencies in transport and transportation, and while doing so, still considering the one thing I keep mentioning, food safety, and to ensure that you are not, getting to get the food you are carrying to be contaminated. We've been able to have a number of pilots and interventions, and looking at even things like green energy and smart solutions. One of the pilot we have worked on is the smart food markets of the future concept, in which concept we look at the markets as very important central areas, and looking at those markets, we came up with the whole model of it being a smart market, in that it is a green market, it is using green energy, renewable, and it is using mobility that again is electric and using green renewable energy. In that market, we are also we bring in plug-in circularity, the full circularity even from water and recycling, and also the waste management, with the waste, like was mentioned earlier, being channeled to the black soldier fly producers who produce the fertilizers and other animal products that come back into the circularity. And so at the moment, and was mentioned earlier, one of our partners, Regen Organics, in partnership with EAGC, where we are distributing their fertilizers to our farmers through the G hubs, and using very well managed logistical and delivery arrangements in terms of scale, and making sure the costs go down, and where to the extent possible, you are also having vessels that are minimizing pollution and all that. But connected to that, we've also done a pilot, and now we are scaling, which was linking with logistics, yes, and handling, yes, but addressing a few more things. And this is a concept we call the cob model. A lot of times people only handle maize in a cob when it is green, and when you want to boil or roast or something like that. But we tested a process where the maize is sold when it is still in a cob, so long as it has attained physiological maturity and it's dry enough, around 18 or maybe going to 16 moisture content. But then you sell it in a cob, so that when you harvest it from the farm, it does not touch the soil at all. You just cut it out, put it in the vessels, and it is taken to a drying facility where it is shelled, and then the cob from that maize is used to fire the kiln to dry that maize. And then when now you dry that maize, when you do all your calculations, you find that there's quite a lot of savings. But the biggest of the benefit is that when we do that cob model, we address the aflatoxin challenge, because you actually deal with aflatoxin to a level where it is even undetectable. So, and that leads to cost savings and transport and logistics, because we're able to get quantities that we can move quicker in bulk and at a lower cost. So all those are some of the examples we've worked on as pilots, and we are scaling them. We started in Rwanda with a company called Kumwe and another member of EAGC called African Improved Food. And now in Uganda, we are doing it. We are discussing with stakeholders in Kenya and Tanzania, and it's something that we believe will be very revolutionary going into the future. Thank you.
I definitely also believe that, because some of these things I'm also hearing about them from the first time, Gerald. Maybe just to wrap up this session, you have traders, you have processors, you have millers on the call. Some of them are thinking of transitioning to some of the circular practices. And I know cost of capital usually sometimes is a barrier. Could you shed any light in terms of from like import loans or any sort of financing or loaning that exists in the market? I know as a council, you have probably had conversations with some of your partners on what mechanisms can be used in the circularity or in the circularity space. Share some insight that you have with us on the same. Also, just before you share on that, please feel free to introduce yourself on the chat box. If you do have any questions for Gerald, drop them also in the chat box. We'll definitely be open to answering them. So Gerald, back to you.
Yeah, thank you very much, Jane. So financing is one of the, actually second of our nightmares. Top of our nightmares is policy. And policies, because we are in the food space and governments find every reason to intervene in the foods for price, for production, for everything. But those interventions, because they come in an ad hoc way, and when they come in and government gets into the space and government becomes a farmer, they become a trader, they become a supplier of agro materials, they crowd out, private sector, and the whole resort becomes very suboptimal things, and it discourages investments very, very much. So one of the things that discourages investment in the agriculture sector is the policy environment being unpredictable, and in such a way that if you are an investor and you're going to take an investment position that is long-term, 5 years, 10 years, 15 years payback, and then policy changes come and your investment goes up in smoke because of policy changes, that really puts back investment, puts back financing, and it's one of the biggest challenges that we're dealing with. But when it comes to the kind of facilities that we've been able to negotiate and talk to partners and work on, we've looked at finance for scaling our solutions, particularly through PPP models. And one example I could give is the IFC-led loans that we know are ongoing, and some of our members of EAGC have been able to benefit from those IFC-led loans to put up silos, to expand their operations, and to bring in equipment and really taking on innovations. So those PPP scaling financing solutions is one example I can share. We've also been having working capital facilities where, again, that is provided to our members by the banks and the financial institutions, particularly to drive innovations and improve on the sector. And we've been able, in certain occasions, been able to get import duty waivers, plus loans and other sort of green packaging gains that we've been able to get. On the trade side, we have developed what we are calling a trade finance fund. We are yet to kick it off, but we've thought through it, and it is a fund that would be used exclusively by those members who are trading on the GSOCO platform, such that if the supplier has supplied the buyer, who is maybe a processor, and that processor requires 7 or 14 days credit period, then the fund pays off the supplier, farmer, and then they extend the credit to the processor or the buyer for the agreed period, and secure that with the account receivable, so that when it is mature, it's due, it is paid back to the fund with a small fee. And so we believe when we get that trade finance fund up and running, and we are talking to lots of partners and trying to fundraise for it, because we have got all the structures to roll it out ready, it will make a very big change, because trade finance sometimes is a bigger challenge in the grain value chain than even financing a mill or financing other equipment. Why? A small mill maybe, or a mill that is doing 10 or 20 tons a day, or even 50 tons a day, would be worth maybe something like 5 or 10, maybe 20 million Kenya shillings, but that mill can turn over 500 million Kenya shillings. Now, that means, therefore, the investment in inventory, raw materials to convert, is much, much more than the equipment. And when banks come and they say, okay, we want you to pledge your asset, but that asset is just a small portion of the total value of the business. And then it gets into an issue where now we've even have other financing innovations we are working on called the warehouse receipt financing, where you convert the commodity to become a security and you can use it to borrow. And with that, we also have collateral management services that even as at EAGC, we do offer to our members in a way that the member gets financing to buy stock in a collateralized store. And then when now they have the stocks ready, whenever they need to mill, they need 200 or 300 bags, they pay for that, it is released until they clear the whole 100,000 or whatever kind of, with that collateral management supporting finance. But it's a tough one. Financing is not easy. Thank you. Back to you, Jane.
Okay. Thank you so much, Gerald. I mean, there's always just nuggets that you're dropping here and there. Perhaps the next time we'll talk about trade finance in this particular grain sector. For now, allow me to throw a question that's in our Q&A box. And it's in respect to our first presentation when it comes to regions. I think Titus is asking, are they using biomass or they focus on biochar? Gerald, I know you mentioned working with them. I don't know if this is something you can respond to or not.
Yeah, I could say for the region, I know the region team, they are farmers of black soldier fly, and one of the besides harvesting the black soldier fly that then is converted into feed after drying, there is a byproduct called frass fertilizer. And then that frass fertilizer is composted further and sometimes even blended with other mineral fertilizers to come up with a product that is very good for the soil and also for the crop. So I would respond with an answer of composting to then get the entire biomass going into organic fertilizer. Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you so much for that. We have come to the end of this panel session, Gerald. I will still keep the chat box open for anyone that has questions to Gerald and the EAGC team. Please feel free to leave them because we are moving to the last panel session. Jared, I'd also ask if there's anyone who's interested in the work that EAGC is doing, who in the chat box can be the contact person? Should we drop an email, your info or something? I'll task Olive or Jillian to either drop an email in the chat box. For anyone that maybe has not interacted with EAGC before, you can definitely reach out to learn more about what the council is doing in the East African blockchain. Thank you so much, Gerald. This was very insightful. Looking forward to more sessions. There's just gems. There's just gems. I don't even know how to summarize this, but allow me to transition to the next panelist. So thank you very much, Gerald.
Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you. So before we transition to the next panel session, we do have a poll session just to see what your thoughts are and what your engagement looks like with the content that at least Gerald has shared with us. So I will cue the last poll question and we can be able to proceed from there. Yes, so the first question is, what is the most common packaging material your business uses for grain products? Feel free to pick either of those responses and we'll be able to share at the end of the poll. It's an interactive one, so you can actually vote real time. So feel free. What is the most common packaging material your business uses for grain products? The questions are also tailored to what we're discussing today around circularity. Yes, feel free to submit your answers. We are about to close this poll in just a few. I'm seeing a good number of you have submitted your responses. Okay, so we're seeing a poll on my end that the highest that we're seeing here is plastic sucks, but that's changing the more people are voting. So I'll give it maybe a few more seconds, then we'll actually give the responses to the poll. So we're going to close the poll at this point and just share what the results are. So we have a good sizable response and engagement to that poll. I think now it's closed. Yes, so the highest is woven polypropylene bags. This feels like a titration terminology, but that is the highest at 42%, followed by plastic sacks at 37%, and the least being jute or ballap bags, but closely followed at around 11 and 5% is bulk containers. And I guess this is also dependent on what grain you're moving around, but at woven bags is what we have the highest at 42%. We can pull up the next poll questions. If you're having any challenge with the poll question, just drop a comment on the chat box. We'll be able to assist. Also, I'm seeing the team at EAGC has also put up an email and a phone number for more information regarding what EAGC does. Feel free to reach out on communications@eagc.org or the number that's highlighted below. That's 0710 60 73 13. So if you haven't been interacting with EAGC, feel free to reach out to them through those two contacts. So what is the biggest barrier to adopting sustainable packaging or transport in your operation? I know we've talked about pilots, models, businesses that are using some of these solutions. So if you're a business owner that's in the grain value chain, what is the biggest barrier for you moving towards sustainable packaging or even transport when it comes to your operation? We have high upfront cost, lack of information or training, limited supplier options, weak policy or regulatory support, not a client priority. So I'll give us maybe a minute to interact with the poll. We have one last question and then we'll close the poll section. Yes, I can see we have a good response. I'll give it a few more seconds. What's the biggest barrier to adopting sustainable packaging or transport? Feel free to pick either one that you think makes the most sense. I think so far we have a high submission on one of the few that have been selected. Just a few more seconds, around 30 seconds. I'm seeing a good number of you have responded, and then we will close the poll. All right, we will close the poll now. And what we have currently is the biggest barrier to adopting sustainable packaging or transport in your operation is high upfront costs. This is up to 65% of you think that is the highest priority. A small percentage of 15 thinks that's not a current priority. 10% thinks weak policy, and a split of 5 and 5% think lack of information and limited supplier options. So we are about to move to the next session where we'll talk about the investment and the financing around circularity in this green sector. So we'll put up the last poll before we transition. So Kevin can pull up the last poll. Do you think export-import loans or trade finance tools should include environmental criteria or incentives? I know Gerald has highly talked about trade finance and some of the things that should be considered. Do you think it's important when we're talking about trade finance, we should consider environmental criteria or incentives? That is, before you access any of this money, an assessment is done whether you're thinking environmentally or whether you're thinking impact, and also just around the same. I will give us a few. I'm seeing a big part of us already engaging with the poll. So a few more seconds, and then we'll close the poll. Okay, we'll close the poll and pull up the results. A good number of you have engaged with the poll. Yes, we have 85% saying yes, it would drive more sustainable practices. 10% is of the opinion that maybe if it's simple to implement. No is 5%, it may complicate access to finance. So currently, a majority of the audience are thinking about finance with a sustainable lens, and finance that eventually protects the environment and supports environmental conservation. So we'll close this poll for now. Thank you so much for engaging. We are moving to the last panel session. As we close out this webinar, I will read one comment from David that says, for general consumption and usage, and in keeping with standards, it would be useful to standardize the understanding of circularity in the context of this webinar. I think I'll definitely give that context here before we move to the second panelist. But allow me first to introduce our second panelist. His name is David Irungu Wagema. He's a distinguished leader in capital markets, financial innovation, and sustainable development. He has nearly 2 decades of experience when it comes to driving investment solutions across the sector. Currently, he serves as a business development sector leader when it comes to agriculture at the Nairobi Securities Exchange. So we are very glad to have Irungu Wagema on the call today to discuss some of the financial and investment instruments we can use in the sector. So Wagama, I think I'll let you introduce yourself, and then I will come back and respond to David's comment, and then we can start the panel session. So karibu sana, Irungu.
Thank you very much, even for having me. I really appreciate Takataka Nimali and also the East Africa Grain Council, even for this opportunity. I think I've really been learning from when it began, from Evans to also Masila, and then, of course, Masila, and also, of course, to the entire engagement. I think it has been very enlightening. So allow me to introduce ourselves, our organization. So our organization is Nairobi Securities Exchange. We've been in existence since 1954, and of course, this year we've come up with a new strategy, 2025-2029, where we are actually looking at how can we have real impact to the real economy, how can we affect people's lives. So in terms of our purpose, why we wake up every morning, why we are doing so many things, is really to inspire Africa's transformation. We feel there's a lot of potential that the continent has, but we have to also be part of the solution even to this. So it goes beyond, we want you to list making transactions to the social economic growth of Africa by creating opportunities for businesses and individuals to thrive. Tied to that, then our vision is then to be the preferred value creation partner. And I'm glad, in fact, before this meeting, we were engaging with the East Africa Grain Council, and even earlier on, we were engaging with Takataka Nimali. So it's a good coincidence where we are saying, let us work together. Let us be partners in value creation. So we are not just looking at just a short-term partnership, but enduring partnerships with businesses, and of course, even focusing on long-term value creation and mutual growth. And then the last one is really how we do that. And that's through our mission, which is to unleash Africa's potential through innovative capital market solutions that will be powered by people, partnerships, and technology. So that underscores our commitment to be able to work with the ecosystems such as yourselves, to be able to see how can we come up with solutions. Why that is very dear to us is because, like, if you look at the Kenyan situation, 33% of the GDP or 26% of GDP, depending on the source, is agriculture. When you look at also in terms of contribution in terms of value, GDP from value creation activities around the same, we have a whole 27%. If you combine that, that is a significant amount of the GDP from agri. When you look at government revenues, import earnings, export earnings, 60% is coming from agri. Government revenues, 45% is from agri. And also when you look at food security with a growing population and youthful population that is there, we need to feed this population. Again, the thing is squarely on the shoulder of agri and food security. So, and also when you look at climate change, that is something that is affecting us. Yet when you look at financing and even the different finance institutions, if you look at bank loan books, they're only 2 to 3% is agri, which is not commensurate to this. And I won't talk about ourselves, and that's why we are here. Ours is even worse, you're at 1%, and that's why we want to see how can we be able to empower the whole ecosystem. So for us, I believe we're in the right place, and also we have the right partners in the house, and we'll be able to see how we can be able to drive this conversation. So when you look at even maybe like the grain value chain, and it's also good to have a functioning full value chain, not just the tail end, but the entire value chain, from input supplies, what is the quality of the seeds, the fertilizers being used, the machinery, all the way to production, both small scale and also large scale farming. And then also when you come to aggregation and storage, looking at the silos that are there, and even the warehouses that are there. And then to processing, we talk about like milling, and also in this circularity discussion, you're also talking about waste to energy, and then also distribution. Markets become real keys, because even as you're setting up the different ecosystems that are there, even within the grain value chain, it has to be market driven. And we have also digital platforms that will complement that. At the end of the day, this is going to go to the consumer at the household or even industry level. How is that taken care of? And then, of course, with our circularity discussion, how is waste recovery, compost, even at the earlier part of the value chain, biogas, recyclables, and all that. So that becomes very important when you look at it. And looking at across the entire value chain, we have solutions that we can be able to co-create, even cutting right across the same. So we are looking at being able to even have things like green bonds. We already have a green bond, the Acorn Green Bond, that has been used to have student accommodation. But now when you put on the lens of agri, and especially now that we are looking at maybe the grain. How can we have also climate smart grain storage? How can we have mechanization, irrigation, and logistics being supported? And green bonds actually can be able to do that. So just for information, a green bond is just like a loan, the same way you'd go to a bank and then you're given a loan. And for the bank, when you go to them, the loan that you're given from month one, after you've maybe done your grace period, you start paying interest plus principal, principal plus interest. But with a bond, what it does, it allows you the flexibility to pay at the end the principal. And then in between, you'll just be paying after every 6 months, you can just be paying the interest, which makes it more affordable, even given the way seasons are, and even to the different things that you would want to do. So green bonds come in and add an additional layer. It's a loan that you'll later repay. But with it, we're also saying, are you taking care of the environment in terms of the impact to the environment and also the impact to the society, social impact, and also having good governance? So green bonds is a big opportunity. We also have sustainability linked bonds. I hear there are people from Tanzania. I know one of the banks in Tanzania has done a sustainability linked bond that is there. So here we are saying that tied to different milestones, say in the grain value chain, can we be able to reduce post-harvest losses and also improve carbon efficiency? So we can be able to look at maybe a bond that is also tied to different milestones. We also have agri-based exchange traded funds currently, and watch out on this space later within this year, we'll be having a food and agri exchange traded fund. An exchange traded fund in agricultural terms is a basket. So instead of having just one particular security, maybe like when you are buying Safaricom alone, you can actually buy a basket. So in this particular case, you can have a number of different companies that even like the East Africa Grain Council, we can work on maybe supporting some of this and bringing them to market. Michael, Gerald has talked about also they are setting up a commodities exchange. We can also complement that by the futures, where you can also maybe already get into the market and already give maybe some future prices and indications, and also leveraging on the derivatives to also mitigate against price risk, especially for maize and the different other grains that we have. And then we also have our Ibuka program. Maybe you're an SME, you're just starting out, or a cooperative. We can be able to work with you on this journey, or even an aggregator. We can be able to work with you on the journey to prepare you, first of all, to see what is the current state of your investability. If there are gaps, we see how do we meet that, and then we do capital raising. So a 3-step process. First, we check what are the gaps, we meet the gaps, and then now we help you to raise finances. So that is our Ibuka program that we have. And then also we currently have also coming this year an agricultural REIT that will be there on warehousing. So if you are looking at storage, we also have REITs which would be able to come. A REIT is a real estate investment trust. So how can we be able to invest in real estate like shares? So simply put, and also it's not just real estate in terms of residential or commercial buildings. We are saying even to warehouses, we can also be able to leverage on a product like that to be able to have that. And of course, we also have blended finance, where we are saying even to subsidize, we have concessional development partners. How can we partner with them to be able to raise finance for you? Last but not least, I know Jane has also been talking about carbon credits platforms. Currently, we also have someone we are working with along the same journey on our Ibuka program to see maybe even leveraging, for them is stopping deforestation and generating carbon credits that are going to be able to support especially education. But we can also have something around regenerative agriculture, and that can also be able to support maybe the grain value chain. So those are opportunities that we can be able to see from a capital markets point of view. The rest is, of course, a challenge even to East Africa Grain Council who are here. And I know maybe Jane wanted us to have a discussion, but we can be able even to set up a circular economy fund. I'm just throwing that as a bonus, in addition to all this, that when we come together, Taka Nimali, East Africa Grain Council, we can be able to have that will support financing of the different parts of the value chain, support also the climate resilience and also circular technologies, and of course to de-risk for SMEs. So allow me to stop there, but I had more. I'll share this slide so that we can have interaction. Thank you very much. Back to you, Jane.
You truly utilize those 5 minutes quickly, right? I know we've jam-packed the audience with a lot of information. I will try and deduce and debunk some of the concepts that you've had Irungu discuss here. But before we go there, let me respond to David. David has asked us that in keeping up with standards, it would be useful for us to understand the element of circularity that we are discussing in the context of this webinar. So when we talk about circular principles, in the simplest of terms, how do we maximize the use of materials and resources by keeping them in use for as long as possible before they become waste, right? So it's ideally in the scientific world, we call it having a closed feedback loop system. What do we mean by a closed feedback loop system? That as much as possible, for every raw material that we extract in our processes and in our products, we utilize them to their fullest potential before before casting them away as waste. So that has informed the principles of reuse, recycle, repurpose, and some of the newer ones have been redesigned, right? And there are quite many, depending on the sector that you're in. But to give context for the specific sector here, it's not that the concept of circularity changes depending on the sector. No, it's just the methodology in which it is achieved is quite unique based on the business or the service that you're offering. In the context of the grain value chain, we focused on waste management because we at Takataka Nimali, that is our forte. We ensure that every element of waste is accounted for across different value chains. So where can we repurpose? Where can we reuse? Where can we recycle? Where can we remanufacture? All those principles of circularity in the context of the grain sector. Other contexts of materials or resources, as you had us talk about logistics, is how do we ensure efficiency in that system? Remember, we're saying nothing should go to waste. So if it is from fuel point of view, if it's from an energy point of view, if it's from a water point of view, how do you ensure you use the least amount that is efficient for your operations without it becoming waste? So that is a context of circularity that we are discussing here in this webinar. Given that backbone, it means businesses either have to reprogram or restructure some of their services and some of their operations. As we were heavily discussing in the session with Gerald, is rethinking of how do we now rethink of the grain value chain, because just as our webinar is discussed, redefining the grain value chain with a lens of circular approaches. So whether it's packaging, whether it's logistics, right? And then we realize to do this transition, financing is required, and some of it Gerald discussed when we talked about trade finance. But beyond financing, investment is also required, and there are different instruments that we can utilize. So David here today, I know he has given us a very big crunch down. We will definitely share all this information and the slides, but allow me to kick us off. I hope I have successfully answered David's contextualized question. So Wagema, let me take us back a little bit, right? In the context of capital market instruments, right? I know you've talked about blended finance models, you've talked about rates and the like. What can be used to attract investment, particularly when we talk about sustainable logistical systems within the grain sector? As Gerald was saying, a big chunk of budgetary needs comes from logistics, which 10 to 30%, and that's a big margin, right? So from an investment point of view, what can we attract in that sector? And if not logistics, right? If maybe we're saying the investment landscape for logistics is not as lucrative, right? As you've said, NSE is contributing 1% in that agricultural sector. What other attraction area can we actually focus on when we're talking about investment instruments?
All right, thank you very much, Jane. Yeah, so like I did mention, and I think it's really important, and especially when you're looking practically at the grain value chain, and especially a focus on logistics and also aggregation infrastructure. So for us within the capital markets, our role is to mobilize long-term financing, especially for strategic infrastructure, even within the grain sector. So especially like when you have like the warehousing or aggregation centers and even clean transport, we can be able to mobilize that. Maybe like I did mention, like agro-logistic REITs, which can be there for grain storage and silos. So we can be able to have a real estate investment trust that can also be geared towards now setting up the grain storage and also the silos that are there. We also have, and I know Gerald talked about the warehouse receipting. We currently have someone, but they're dealing with fruits, avocado, where they're talking about an avocado-backed security, where we can have asset-backed or asset-based securities, where maybe that can be backed also by the warehouse receipts. So we were in conversation earlier on with the East Africa Grain Council, and we can be able to see how can we be able to complement each other, even in supporting. And once these have been securitized, how can we be able to trade them? We have different trading platforms, and all these instruments can actually come to market. And I like the fact that East Africa Grain Council are willing to innovate, set the standard. So we are happy even to be able to engage with them, even because they bring together people, and then we see what we can do. And lastly, I did talk about also green bonds, especially with sustainability. We can also have green or mobility, where we can also have trucks that are green. I know that one is gradually getting traction, but these are some of the things that we can be able to see. So key to us is to be able to have instruments that can be able to can be structured around real cash, maybe for grain trade, but also looking at maybe the transport. How can we support that? We already have partners who I know they're also in that agro logistics space where they have green, and we are happy to engage further. Thank you.
So I'm going to take us back just a little bit, right? I know we've talked about rates and green bonds in a layman's language, right? Can we just quickly, on a high level, one, explain when we're talking green bonds, what are we referring to? Because most people are used to normal bonds, right? And I know we have experience setting a few in the continent. Two, if we could, on a high level, also define when we talk about sustainability aligned rates. What are those two key definitions? From there, I think we can pick up on other lessons that can be applied when it comes to like structuring finance, when it comes to clean transport and storage infrastructure. But let's start on the high level. When we're talking about green bonds and sustainability aligned rates, could you define that for our audience?
All right. Okay. Thank you very much. So a bond is really like what I had mentioned earlier, is really like a loan that you're going to pay back. However, for a bond in particular, you pay back at the end of the period. So if it is 7 years, you'll pay the principal after 7 years. But every other 6 months, or depending on how it has been structured, you'll just be paying the interest, which becomes more lucrative than getting financing from the banks. However, also, when we talk about them becoming green, we are really looking at the aspect whereby they're also sustainable. There's an impact on the environment. So what we largely call the ESG. So ESG is now the environment. It has an impact on the environment. We say nowadays planet matters. So the environment. So like what we've talked about from the different things that we've talked about, are they considerate of the environment? So from even the packaging, is it biodegradable? If it is a logistics, is it taking care of the environment in terms of reduction of pollution and all that? So that qualifies to be something that is green. If it is a silos, are we sun drying them, using solar to dry? So all those different elements would actually qualify for green. So when you look at green, there's what we call the climate bond certified areas. And one of them that is major is actually the natural assets like agricultural land. So that one becomes key. And even agriculture in itself is largely green. So we can be able to see maybe how we can plug in, but also the e-mobility and also the circular environment, the circular economy, where we have now the waste management also is also green. So we can be able to have that. So the criteria for it to be a green bond is really that the use of proceeds has to be ring-fenced towards the green initiatives. So you can't take a green bond and then you have maybe some other thing that is out there that is not green, in terms of maybe you're using fossil fuel to a big dimension, or something that is continuously polluting. So it has to be ring-fenced for that. So the use of proceeds has to be to such projects. The second thing is even the selection of those projects. Those projects have to be selected in such a way that, and maybe I could even just, I'll also share a slide on it as well, but we are saying the selection of the projects also has to also comply to maybe the environment objectives. What is it doing to the environment and all that. Something that we are happy to help and handhold you. The other one is even the management of the proceeds. Once you've gotten the money, you've selected the projects, then the proceeds should strictly be used in accordance to that. So we may have even like what we call drawdowns. They give you some amount and that is going to move specifically to those particular areas that are going to be in use. And then the proceeds are really the monies that are coming. So every time when you've gotten some money from the bond, those are like now the proceeds that are coming from the farm, from the whole trade and everything. How are you using the proceeds from the bond rather? Sorry, let me just yeah, so the money from investors, how are we using it, especially for this particular element? And then the last element is really the reporting, where we are saying the money that you've gotten, use it specifically for those projects, but also report. What are the progresses? Or what are the different matrices? How are we impacting the climate? So in a nutshell, that is a green bond, where we are saying it's a loan, but also now complies to those green principles that are there. And we are happy to share some material on it or even go more in depth on it. And then when it comes to the REIT, again, the REIT is really real estate investment trust. So it's like a chama. A trust is like a chama that is there to do in projects. Most of us are used to working with chamas in terms of even when you're mobilizing money. So you come together as a chama, we'll have a promoter and also a specialist. So if it is a real estate to do a silo or maybe some even infrastructure that is related to that, a warehouse, then what we do is that we come together and then people will have units in the REIT. And then now the REIT can be used to get money from the public, which is investable, and then that will go now to the development of the warehouse or even the silo. And then after that, there'll be profits. Maybe as it is being run, then the investors get to share in that. So simply put, it's a real estate investment trust is really just an aggregation or a collective investment vehicle where it brings people together to be able to invest. You yourself, you may not be able to maybe get that factory up and running, a milling, but you can come together, several farmers like they do in KTDA, and then you jointly own that farm, and then you can, the factory or even the mill, then you're able to do that through a REIT. So I hope I've been able to respond to that.
Yeah, really packed there. So I think in the interest of time, I'm just going to follow up with maybe two more questions before we can engage back with our audience. When we talk about your experience with like green bonds or these rates, what kind of partnerships or policy shifts do you think are needed to scale up some of these investments, especially with that circularity or sustainable element when it comes to this East African context of, especially in the context of grain value chain? What do you think can really push some of that investment into that sector?
All right. Okay. I think one of them, which we've actually, is currently in the law, is really the incentive for green bonds and green REITs. All sustainability instruments, they usually don't have some taxes that are there. So once, for example, you raise the money and it is listed on an exchange like ours, there'll be no CGT. That is a capital gains tax, even for the people who are investing. So that becomes an incentive to the people who are investing. So that tax actually allows for that. And then the other one is not really an incentive or a policy. It's really that the world has gone green, and there are many funds that are available to invest in some of this. So if we are able to align to the green principles or ESG, we also have funds that are nowadays going to be specifically aligned to that. So we're also talking about cheaper capital that can come because we have impact investors. Impact investors are not just looking at the bottom line. They're also concerned on how it is also impacting, say, the environment, how it is impacting society, and also the governance structures that are there. So in a nutshell, we are saying that, one, there are policy incentives that are there currently, even for green investment. So any green or a sustainability-backed instrument will already receive some tax concessions. And then secondly, we also have investments that are actually coming in to be able to invest particularly in some of these. And you can actually use the same even to come together and aggregate. I think for us, and maybe what we'll be looking for, even with the East Africa Grain Council and people who are here, Takataka and Imali, how about if we came up and even aggregated? That way it gives a bigger voice, even when it comes to policy change, so that if there's any additional policy that is required, then we have that collective lobbying power that can also enforce policy in a positive way, which I know also the South Africa Grain Council is at the head of doing. Thank you.
Thank you. I know you've given us an overview of, from a policy point of view, from a structuring point of view, what kind of investment instrument do you want to focus on, whether it's a rate, whether it's a bond, where is it targeted to, especially when we've talked about like the aggregation centers, the logistics for transport. So for businesses or SMEs that are listening to this and they're saying, we would like to be investment ready for some of these instruments. I know you've, on a very high level, talked about NSC's Ibuka incubator, but maybe you could share more. As an SME that's looking to get ready for this kind of investments, how can they plug into the platform and get ready for some of these investments?
All right, thank you very much. Yeah, so for us, the Ibuka program, we launched it in 2018, and it was really geared towards how can we support SMEs. And then this year with our new strategy, we even have an Agri Ibuka. So the Agri Ibuka is also focused on Agri SMEs and even cooperatives that are actually looking to become investor ready. So part of what we do, we say Ibuka is like a hospital. It's also like a school. So with the hospital bit, first of all, we check the agribusiness. What is the health of it? We do a business diagnostic. So the first step is actually to be able to do a business diagnostic, to be able to see and check the health. And then from there, once we've been able to see any gaps that could be there, then we can be able to support. We have a panel of different consultants who can be able to support on different aspects. So be it something to do with governance or even financial structuring. Then with the investment banks and some of the advisors and consultants we have on board, they're also going to go at very favorable rates, even for you. But then we are able to also structure maybe the transaction, fill in the gaps that are there, and then be able to now handhold you towards when it comes to capital raising that is going to be there. And then we also have ESG and also sustainability onboarding. So that means that also part of it would also, first of all, involve the education. So we have trainings that we normally do. That's why I say the Ibuka is also a school where we have structured trainings that will take you step by step, even as you go through the different milestones. Currently, we have a cohort that we've been taking through. So with them at every stage, first of all, understanding the forest. What are the different instruments that we've talked about? And then from there, maybe if it is things to do with governance, we take you through that. If it is things to do with ESG, we also demystify that and we see what is best aligned. So the first thing that we do once you onboard the program is establish the primary objective. The primary objective is not to do a green bond or a REIT and all that. What do you really want? That is connected to your agribusiness. And then we work towards that. The different instruments are just tools to help you achieve your end. So that's how we have structured the Ibuka. So we are there to work with you throughout the journey. Because, and then also one of the key things that we are working on, and that's why I'm also asking maybe Takataka Nimali and also the South Africa Grain Council, why don't we set up a fund? So that by the time you are coming to the program, we already have some of these funds already available. So it's almost like plug and play, be it a working capital solution or even long-term financing to do infrastructure projects. So that is what we have for Ibuka. We have partnered with different DFIs, and also our regulator is actually also checking on us. And then, of course, we also have FSD Africa and amongst others. And also we are looking at even blended finance tools. So it is not just even the bonds. We also have even sukuks and other agri-sector players. So we all benefit. There's also networking within the program. And my colleague, Wendy, is actually on this call. So we actually have a call for proposals that was expiring or closing today. If you're interested, maybe with the presentation we'll share on the last page, we can extend, because you've just had, we can also extend the same opportunity to you. And Wendy, my colleague who's on the call, would also be happy to handhold us. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, David, for plugging Ibuka. I have one last question, but before I ask that question, Wendy, perhaps you can drop an email where the participants can also plug into the work that NSC is doing to support SMEs and also just businesses in general. You can drop an email and also just your details on the chat box for anyone that would be interested in that. Wagama, as we close this panel session, what lessons solutions do you think can be applied based off your experience setting up some of these instruments when it comes to structuring financing for the grain sector, whether it's storage infrastructure, whether it's clean transport? We're thinking sustainability here. What is one or just two lessons you think the sector can benchmark with as they're thinking of applying some of these instruments to scale some of these solutions?
All right, thank you very much, and it's really a great honor to be in this particular esteemed, webinar. So I think for us, sustainability is no longer just a regulatory checkbox. So even as we are thinking about it in the grain sector, we're also saying it's also a capital opportunity, where we are saying even as you as you set up yourself. Yesterday I was talking to someone who does the bags, some of the eco bags that are there. They're actually the largest maker of that, and he's saying they are going through sustainability, ensuring that they tick all, not just tick all the boxes, but they are really sustainable, even when it comes to the disposal, even the health elements about it, the social impact and all that. So for me, as a parting shot, having worked within the sector, I would say let us explore the capital markets, and especially even the green finance that is available. And even if maybe for whatever reason it looks a bit intimidating, you know, the other thing that we said even about Ibuka is that Ibuka is like a shallow end. You don't have to worry about listing. You know, some people when they hear NSC, they're thinking, hey, they're with Safaricom and all that. No, there's room for every person. So I think it is to take that first step in investing. We have a saying that is also related to the sustainability. And we say that the best time to plant a tree is 20 years ago. The next best is now. Yeah, so that means that if you want to raise capital, you want to start getting invested, start now. And I can see my colleague, Wendy, has been able to share the details and even our contact details on the chat. You can get in touch with us, and we are happy to walk the journey with you. So I think the thing is to work with you, and that's one of the things that we have actually changed even within the investment ecosystem. So we'll be there, and that's our commitment to you. So thank you very much, Jane, even for having me. I'm really honored and happy to engage further. I'll share the material even as we've discussed. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Wagema. That was very insightful, very packed as usual. We will definitely ensure to share all this information. Also, on the other side, just to note, also here at TTNM, we have a consultancy wing that I head that specifically deals with ESG. That's ESG advisory and ESG platforms. Should this be something that you're also interested in checking out and understanding the body of work to some of the things we're talking about here today, my colleague Doris has also shared phone number and email address that you can reach out to. And I see also Wendy from NSC has also shared contacts that you can reach out and have more discussions around this. Right about now, we have around just 10 minutes left to this webinar, and I want to utilize them to engage all of you that have stayed till this very last end. So if you do have any questions, now is a good time to drop them in the chat box or in the Q&A section. But I have one last poll, because I know we've listened to a lot today. So I'll highlight on Kevin to share that poll so that we can be able to close the webinar on time. Again, feel free to also give comments, feedback, about more. The chat box is very much open for that. But for now, let's go through the poll. So the poll, first question we have is, what type of investment would most accelerate cleaner logistics in the grain sector? This is just testing out what we've discussed here. What do you think makes it? Green bonds or sustainability linked? I think public-private partnerships would be of keen interest. I know Gerald talked about this when he was discussing trade finance. Do you think venture capital for logistics would be the way to go? A VC comes and puts money into a startup. Government subsidies or incentives. I know some of us feel shy to engage because maybe you feel like I'm not so sure all these instruments, how they work entirely, but it's just to gauge based off what we have discussed today. What do you think is more critical? And I know some of us are very familiar with some of these instruments, so we can share what our thoughts are from an investment point of view. What do you think would accelerate cleaner logistics in the grain sector? I see a lot of us are engaging with the poll. We are about to close it in a few, so feel free to share that and share your responses. We'll be closing the poll in just a few more seconds. Okay, we are going to close the poll now. I see David on the comment section says public-private partnerships. A big percentage of you says green bonds or sustainability-linked loans. That's at 47%. PPPs at 32%. Again, each of these instruments, as Gerald and Wagema have shared, are structured based on the need for your business. So, but it's interesting to see that now we have a higher interest for green bonds and sustainability-linked loans. So thank you very much for that engagement. Government subsidies is the lowest at 5%. I do not know what that says about our government, but I will leave it at that. And we have at 16% with venture capital for logistics technology, which makes sense, especially in the startup world. Let's put up the second poll, Kevin. What is the biggest barrier to financing sustainable transport and storage in regional grain corridors? What is the biggest barrier for financing sustainable transport or storage in that sector? Is it high perceived risk by investors? Is it lack of bankable projects? Do you think it's weak infrastructure, policy or regulatory uncertainty, limited private sector coordination? I know each one of us has interacted with these conversations at some point. It would be interesting to see. I can see your votes are coming in handy, so feel free to put them up. We have just 6 minutes remaining to the call. I would like to keep time so that we finish exactly at 5 o'clock. So we'll give this a few more seconds. We have one last poll and then we will close the session. All right, we will definitely be closing the poll and see what most people are discussing and seeing as the top reason. Kevin, if you could share the responses. All right, we have high risk perceived by investors at 50%, which is a big number of you. Lack of bankable projects, 22%, closely followed by limited private sector coordination. And lastly, it's policy and regulation. No one disagrees, or rather no one thinks we have weak infrastructure. So the highest percentage is the risk element of it. So definitely interesting to see that engagement. We'll pull up the last poll. So Kevin, if you could put up the last poll. Are you an organization or your organization currently exploring any investment or partnership opportunities in clean logistics or packaging for agriculture? You could indicate yes, actively involved, exploring options, whether not yet but interested. No, not a priority right now. Again, we want to make these sessions very valuable based on the people we have on the call. If you're actively pursuing some of these investment or partnership opportunities, We have different contacts on the chat box that you can access and reach out to. If not yet, but interested, stay tuned. We'll definitely be doing more follow-up webinars where we can share more information and you can explore this further, even with the different institutions that have been discussed here today. So in the interest of time, I think I'm going to close this poll shortly. All right, I'll give it a few more seconds. I can see a lot of us are still responding. Okay, we've closed it. Percent yes at 46%. We have 23% exploring, and then we have 31% not yet but interested. So most people think it's a priority. We're just on a spectrum. Again, reach out to any of the contacts indicated below. I have just 2 minutes, and I want to bring the webinar to a close. Before we bring the webinar to a close, we'd really like to hear from you. So we're going to put up a short survey. And thank you so much for even staying with us up to the very end. I see most of you are still on the call. We'll just put a short survey for what you've thought about the session. If you have any comments, any feedback you want to give the audience, please feel free to also put it up. Kevin, if you could put the first poll. Within a minute, we'll definitely be done because I know we have maxed out the session. So how would you rate the overall value of the webinar? 1 star is pure. Somewhere in between there is a 2 or 3 star, and 4 would be an excellent. You can also feel free to give your comments in the chat box. We'll definitely be staying on the lookout for some of those comments, and we appreciate you staying on the webinar. So thank you very much for that. I'm seeing a lot of us are engaging with the poll. Very generous of you to give us this high stars, but we're still open to take more feedback. I know we have somewhere around a minute, so I'll give it a few more seconds. I can see a lot of us are engaging. Based on the session we've had today, the panelists, the structure, just what would you rate the overall value of the webinar based on what your expectations were registering and what did we meet some of those expectations? We're being very vulnerable here while we ask for this feedback. Okay, I think we have a good poll, so I will close it at 3.8. So thank you very much for those star ratings. Kevin, if we could move to the last one. Which session or speaker was most impactful for you and why? You can just quickly type your response and submit. This will definitely help us tailor better sessions and more insightful ones. So feel free to drop your responses. The responses are anonymous, so do not feel shy. We are open to that feedback. Thank you very much. I can see most of you already submitting. So you enter your response. Thank you. I am seeing very vast knowledge across all our speakers, knowledge of the region, the value chain, insightful. We're still getting more practicability. These are good things. Time, it would be interesting to see what time means here. Different areas, new information, knowledge of the region. I will keep this open for a while so that we take more comments on what was most impactful for you and which sessions were. I'm seeing more and more of you are putting in very positive things. So thank you very much. All right, I think most of us have given their responses, so I will close that and we will take the last polls, which is what are you most interested in all these organizations? This will really help us in what the post output of this webinar would be. Again, I've eaten 3 minutes into your time. This is the last one, and then we are done. Are you or your organization interested in exploring any of the following? Select all that apply, whether it's investment partnerships in clean logistics, whether it's technical assistance or training in circular solutions and waste management. Is it pitching innovation to investors? Is it participating in working groups or follow-up forums? Do you want to receive a summary report of this webinar? This is the last poll session of the day. I am very cognizant of time, so I will give this a minute and it will really help us determine what the output of the webinar is going to be. I can see a lot of responses are coming in. A few more seconds, and then we will close. All right, I'll give it a few more seconds. I'm still seeing some voting. I'll give it a few more seconds, and then we'll close the webinar. Again, thank you very much for everyone that has participated, for your insights, for your presence. Feel free to email any other contacts that have been shared on the email address to Gerald Masila and David Irungu and Evan Sabok. Thank you very much for gracing us as speakers for this webinar. We look forward to more engaging and thought-provoking sessions. I have been your host, Jane Acheng. I work here as the head of ESG advisory at Takataka Nimali. I am very delighted to host each and every one of you. I think right now we'll close the poll. We see a majority of you are interested in technical assistance or training in circular solutions. That's at 27, and slightly followed by a summary report of this webinar at 22%. We are very grateful to have each and every one of you. Allow me to close on behalf of the East Africa Green Council and also TTNM for gracing us in this webinar. Until next time, please be on the lookout for our social media handles, your WhatsApp group, whichever platform you engage with us on. We'll definitely be doing more follow-up sessions like this. And until next time, it's goodbye from us. Thank you, David, for your comment. Thank you. Goodbye, everyone.